It's really pleasant for me to have Ivor Swartz here in Johannesburg. My name is Rudy Swanepoel, and Ivor and myself are going to chat a bit about prejudice this morning in the light of events that are unfolding in the world right now. So Ivor, thank you for joining.
Yeah.
And it's always lovely to talk to you. Ivor, I think a while ago you referred to young people, and you said it's interesting how some young people seem to understand what is happening in the world right now in terms of race and the many conversations about race and difference that are occurring right now. And you made me think with your remarks, because many of the activism at the moment across the globe.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm in my late 40s, you're in your mid 30s, and we are struggling with this. And many of us are sort of scared to have conversations about this. So you made me think about prejudice quite a bit. What was it that made you make that comment about how some young people seem to be more free from prejudice?
Rudy, I think the world is opened up for the next generation, specifically Gen Z, which your kids are part of, and in many ways they are seeing that what has been built with old systems, what has been kept with tradition, what has been kept with what was globally socially acceptable, that has not been working as of late, because they find themselves in schools where they are faced with the reality of, but I have a friend who comes from a completely different background as I am, and they are just as normal and a teenager as I am, but I'm in a home where I'm being subliminally taught that I am superior to my friend, and that, I think, a lot of the pushback from the younger generation is because they sit with this tension that what I've been taught subliminally and what I'm experiencing, these two doesn't connect with each other in many ways.
But so in other words, I think what you're saying is we need to be helped.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to. And
sorry to say, but we need to be taught by the younger generation.
We need to be taught.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask you about your experience, because from what I know and from what you are telling me, you are doing a lot of work to understand what these dynamics are all about.
Yeah.
But I want you to please tell me and tell listeners what is your experience around that. And let's have a.
I mean, Rudy, we are doing a lot of, just as friends and brothers in Christ, we are doing a lot of these conversations between us, and we seem to have found this is where we are both at. This is the events of the past, and this is our experiences. But we have found a common ground where we can have these conversations and have them respectfully and healthily. We agree on a lot of things simply because of the synergy and the synchronization of where we are at. But there's a lot of people that don't have that. And so the moment someone like myself come and say, but you come from a different place, I come from a different place, I don't think you get where I'm at, immediately there's something that rises up in them. And so I thought, let me go read up on, how does white people view the world? How does black people view the world? I read Steve Biko, I Write What I Like, and then I read Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. But then there's a point at which, when I step into conversations with colleagues or friends or whatever, I come across as aggressive, as angry, simply because they have not made the effort to meet me somewhere in the conversation around prejudice.
Of course, that's a painful reality that that white people, in general, or many white people, respond like that. And I want us to talk a bit about pain. So I think what happens is the moment you share some of your experiences and your opinion, you know, the God, my gods are up, or the gods come up, and it's as if I don't want to hear about your pain and acknowledge the pain of the past and the present. Because if this was only pain of the past, we would have not been having this conversation. But it's now. So I mean, I try to, when I hear this, I try to understand, and not only understand with my mind, but understand with my heart that your experience is valid. You see, I think what happens is that the default of much of the West, or the Western world, is that my position as a white person, my position is always valid, and my experiences are always valid.
And it is, né? But by that same token, other people's experiences are equally valid. And I think that's where the struggle, that's where the tension comes in. You know that your story is valid. You know that someone else's story is valid, but it's not equally as valid as yours. And that's where, in that space, in that disconnection, is where the pain lies for me. So when someone comments on a Facebook post that I've made, or sent me an inbox about, I liked you better when you weren't so political. You know, it's as if you are saying, you were equally valid to me when you weren't speaking about the things that I'm guilty of, right? When you didn't speak out about the things that I know I struggle with, I liked you more. We could sit around a fire. That's the only space where my story was equally valid, and that's where the pain for me lies.
So, in other words, if you and I were the two people that you've now referred to, right? I would be dismissing your experience. I would be making your emotion and your opinion less valid. And that is not a lack of thing. That is not a lack of thing. And I think that's what many people are struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, for me, I've had a few moments where, and we have had many of these conversations where I was at the brink of either a anger outburst or an emotional outburst, simply because there's not a lot of people that get the seat that you, as Rudy, my friend, who's sitting in. They don't get that seat. They don't sit with, I want to hear your pain, and I want to hear the full of it. And I want the full of it to sit with me, to make me uncomfortable. And then I'm going to respond to your pain, not to defend my guilt, not to defend my position, but I want to respond to your pain simply because you are hurting, period, right? And people don't want to be there. I wrote a lament poem, an angry lament poem, and at the end of it, I said, for me, the biggest struggle is that there's only a few spaces where myself, as a person of color, can talk about my pain with white people, and 90% of my friendship circles is white, but there's only a few places where I can talk about it. You see?
So what do we need? What do we need in order to get that 90% down and create more space for these conversations to take place, and for us to be more honest? You see, again, that dynamic is obvious, because in the, let's call it the white world, um, my opinion is by default
Yeah.
valid or allowed
Yeah.
or welcome.
And heard, and it
And
matters.
and it matters. And if you are saying in 90% of circles that you are operating as a human being, as a professional person, you
With
don't
all of this.
well, yes, you don't feel that. What do we need in order to get more space, more air in the room? What do we need?
I think a starting point is to realize how bankrupt on empathy we are as a nation, as a society. People think they are more empathetic than what they really are. We are bankrupt empathetically, and so to acknowledge that, and then what can I do to enlarge my empathy? It's for me practical, simple. That the term of walk across the room. We are in it. I've been to your house. I know your kids. I've sat with your kids. I've ate at your table. We are friends. We are brothers. There's for me no doubt about it. But a lot of the other people that I call friends, I've never sat at the table. They've never sat at the table of a person of color. So that walk across the room for the enlargement of empathy, it has never happened for them. And so when we can do that, when we can sit over lunch, when we can sit over breakfast, our empathy will grow and it will bridge that 90%.
Okay, but let's go to the topic of prejudice. So in other words, if we speak about prejudice, prejudice is simply that thing, that almost set of ideas that we have of different groups of people.
Yeah.
So and I mean, in my mind, the groups would be, men towards women, white towards black, this culture towards that culture. And at the basis of prejudice is generalization. So we take some images or perceptions or experiences even, and then we generalize them, and then I arrive at a particular encounter with a set of ideas, and then I expect some things to happen. I mean, I remember, well, I'm very aware of the various prejudices that I grew up with. I mean, the social world of my social world of the 80s and 90s was, women are like this. All women are like that. And conversely, so all blacks are like this. And that is not really conducive to that kind of connection that you are talking about.
I think I like what you said at the foundation of it. It's a generalization. It's that us and them language. And I think the more we can enlarge the us and not the them. Because when we keep us and them separate, the us will always be small. Those of us who are right, who are bigger, who are wealthier, who are better, we are stronger, we have more knowledge, they can't, they will continue to grow because prejudice is a form of exclusion, right? And so when we can make the us larger, when we can say, so women are equally worthy of space in boardrooms, of space in the church, of space in being clergy, whatever. Black people are equally, then the us enlarge. But we often don't see that.
But what is needed in me in order to allow that to happen? And I mean, I'm going to try a guess quickly as part of our chat. I mean, just this weekend, our kids said, but you didn't grow up in let's use the word woke world. your homes were not woke. And our kids asked Karina and myself, they said, why are you aware of these things?
Please answer
and I said, it's a combination of things, combination of exposure, the gospel. I mean, we cannot talk about this
Sure.
and not talk about
Sure.
the appeal of the gospel. And I mean, then Jesus is just so central,
Yeah.
based on all his encounters that he had with different people.
But still, you had to take that leap, because the gospel, even for someone who believe themselves to be better than others, the gospel is still the same for them as well. But what made you take that leap of, I'm going to intentionally unlearn some of the junk, some of the bad theology, some of the, what was it for you?
In fact, I don't know. I don't know. I think um, I think the encounters with different people, and just almost taking or trying to take the gospel and say, well, it's one thing if I say I believe this and I subscribe to this, but it's another thing to almost try out the gospel in terms of the new humanity and see if this heart can connect with that heart, despite the difference and the prejudice and the preconceived ideas and all of that. But in a way, I don't know.
When we drove here now, I saw there was a whole bunch of guys walking in the street. You could see they're on their way to work or they're looking for work, and then there were three ladies, just on a daily, probably their daily jog, white ladies, and these were black guys. And I thought, I wonder what is going through. This is my prejudice. I wonder what is going through those three ladies' minds, because in my prejudice, I assume them to be scared of all of those men walking in the street. And without realizing, I am judging those guys, men of color. I'm already having a preconceived idea about who they are. And I still have to do a lot of unlearning. And so when I sit with you, I realize, maybe you're not the wokest person around, but for you, it had to take intentional effort to unlearn some of those things, right?
I think unlearning is is a very big thing in this conversation, and in practicing, what we say we believe.
But how do we teach church people, black, white, colored? How do we teach them the unlearning of those prejudice, that just the most basic generalizations? How do we teach them to unlearn some of those things practically?
I wonder if it doesn't start with just increasing awareness. If somebody is acting in a way that is saying or unveiling that they are basically basing their judgment and their interaction on preconceived ideas. And I think that the term is calling out, but it almost sounds a bit harsh. It sounds a bit like if it actually
cancel culture.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But I think we need to find kind and gentle ways of making each other aware that you are now basing your behavior or your interaction on a preconceived idea.
And do you think people are open to that sort of gentle calling out, especially for Christians with a Christ-centered worldview? The New Testament is full of examples of calling each other out, holding each other accountable.
Yes.
Are people open to because in my experience, people are open to it, but then they cancel you because you've called them out. Like, you haven't had a race, you haven't had a raspa.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid whether we are ready for it or whether we have an appetite for it or not, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is, what's the alternative? The alternative is sort of perpetual war, perpetual combat, turning our backs on the gospel. Because, I don't know, I mean, there are different ways of looking at the gospel and understanding Jesus.
Yeah.
But I don't see how this is going to change this principle of radical equal worth, shared humanity. I don't know how that's going to, it's not going to go away.
If you look at one of the examples of Paul and Peter in Galatians, right? They've had this experience where Peter was super prejudiced towards the Gentiles, right? When there were no Jews around, you would eat, you would stroll, you would care, and we see it in our culture today. And when the God-fearing Jews came, he would disconnect from the Gentiles, and Paul had to call him out and said, that's hypocritical behavior. And I'm just thinking in terms of today's world, what that conversation would look like. Do we wait till we have a deep established relationship with each other before I call you out? Because then those ideas are so deeply entrenched in you. Because a lot of people would say, you don't even know me and you're judging me. Meanwhile, in Christ, it is my responsibility as a brother to do that, right?
Yeah. That's a profound idea in terms of a couple of things. The one is, when people like ourselves have these conversations, we can easily be accused of being too political, or we are now julle meng nou kerk en politics. But in terms of your example of Peter and Paul in Galatians, I mean,
they were co-laborers, and Paul had to tell him.
Exactly. How do we get away? We can't get away from that. It's what it is. But what I love about your last remark is just almost the covenantal nature of these relationships. If we can extend the covenant and sort of start imagining this brother and sisterhood of humankind in Christ, then it affects every relationship and every encounter that we can possibly have. Ivor, this conversation is far from over. So we must have it again. I hope you are willing to have it again. And thank you for this morning. And
Sure. Now I look forward to our next conversation. I mean, there's a lot to uncover. There's a lot that is happening in the world right now. And I appreciate the way that we can touch base with these conversations.
I do too. Thanks, Ivor.
Thank you.
Thank you.